Mama Ruth had known struggle all her life. After her husband passed away, it was just her and her daughter, Ruth. She toiled each day under the sun, hauling sacks of yams from the early morning market to her roadside spot. With cracked hands and a weather-beaten face, she fought every day not just for survival, but for her daughter's future. Yet, despite all she lacked, Mama Ruth had a heart wide enough to shelter the world. One scorching afternoon, just as Mama Ruth was laying out her yams on a makeshift table made from crates and cloth, she saw a girl walking along the road, her head bowed low, her uniform dusty, and her shoes nearly falling apart. The girl was Rena. Rena was no stranger to hardship either. Her parents had died when she was just a child, leaving her in the care of her aging grandmother. They lived in a modest mud-brick home with a leaking roof and a creaky wooden door that didn't quite shut. Her grandmother, though frail and often sick, did everything in her power to keep Rena in school. She sold vegetables, wove baskets, and sometimes went to bed hungry just to save a little money. But that day, all their efforts had fallen short. Rena had been sent home from school, again. Her fees were overdue, and the school couldn't wait any longer. Rena had pleaded with the headmistress, but policy was policy. As she walked home, fighting back tears, her eyes caught the familiar figure of Mama Ruth at her yam stall. Something about Mama Ruth's face, tired but warm, made Rena stop. She greeted her softly and then, unable to hold it in any longer, shared everything. How her grandmother had tried her best. How she was always first in her class but might have to drop out. How she dreamed of becoming a doctor but felt that dream slipping further away each day. Mama Ruth listened silently, her hand pausing mid-peel. Her eyes, already wrinkled by time and sunlight, softened even more. "Child," she said slowly, "how much is left to pay?" Rena hesitated. "Just enough for this term, but we don't have it. Grandma's tried everything." Without another word, Mama Ruth reached beneath the cloth under her stool and pulled out an old, worn purse. She opened it, revealing several crumpled notes. It wasn't a fortune, but to her, it was everything. Her savings, meant for rent, food, and whatever unexpected expense life might throw at her next. She pressed the money into Rena's hand. "Go pay your fees," she said with a smile. "Don't let anything stop your dream." Rena was stunned. She tried to protest, to say she would pay it back, but Mama Ruth just shook her head. "Make me proud," she whispered. Rena ran all the way home, barely able to contain her joy. When she told her grandmother what had happened, the old woman was overcome with gratitude. She decided they had to go thank Mama Ruth in person. They walked back to the roadside stall together that evening, hearts full of appreciation. But Mama Ruth was gone. The yam stall stood empty, the crates stacked haphazardly. The cloth was missing. Other vendors said the government had cracked down that afternoon, removing unauthorized roadside sellers. No one knew where she had gone. That same evening, Mama Ruth returned to the one-room home she shared with her daughter, only to find Ruth sitting on the doorstep, tears in her eyes, their belongings piled beside her. The landlord had finally had enough of unpaid rent. They had been evicted. Now homeless, with no money left, Mama Ruth took a long, silent bus ride to her sister's house in the next town. Her sister, Miriam, was preparing to move abroad for work and had just finished packing. When Mama Ruth arrived and told her everything that had happened, Miriam stood silently, then embraced her with tears in her eyes. "You gave away everything even when you had nothing," she said. "You're staying here. This house is yours now." Miriam left for her new life overseas, and Mama Ruth stayed behind, now with a roof over her head and a little money her sister had left her to start a small food business. It wasn't easy, but she got back on her feet, sent her daughter to school, and never stopped praying for the little girl with big eyes and a dream in her heart, Rena. Years passed. Rena studied harder than ever, driven not just by ambition, but by gratitude. She graduated top of her class, earned scholarships, and finally made it into medical school. She became a doctor, a respected one, and moved back to her hometown to serve the very community that had raised her. One evening, the hospital emergency room doors swung open. A woman had collapsed on the roadside, unconscious and weak. The nurses brought her in, her clothes torn, her hands still rough and calloused despite the years. Dr. Rena walked in to examine the patient, and her heart stopped. "Mama Ruth," she whispered. Though older and frilier, the woman's face was unmistakable. "Mama Ruth, it's me. It's Rena." Mama Ruth opened her eyes slowly, struggling to focus. When she recognized Rena, a tear slipped down her cheek. "You did it," she said, voice faint. "You became a doctor." Rena held her hand tightly. "Because of you." She ensured Mama Ruth received the best treatment, arranged for her to stay in a comfortable home nearby, and visited her every week. She took care of her like family, because, in her heart, Mama Ruth was family. And every time someone asked Rena what inspired her to become a doctor, she would smile and say, "There was a woman who had nothing, but gave me everything. That's what real wealth looks like." The story of Mama Ruth and Rena became well known in the village. It reminded everyone that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can become the spark that changes a life forever. Because kindness never dies. It lives on in the lives it touches, echoing louder with every passing day. So if this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. You never know how one story, one gesture, one act of compassion can change the world.